Well, good morning and happy new year, everyone. We hope that your crossover into 2023 was everything that you hoped for. Thank you so much for joining us on this first Sunday of the brand new year. We kick off the year with a look back into 2022 and the stories that we covered as media and society that made big waves with you, the viewer. So we're not doing this throwback alone. I am joined in studio by Mr. Themba Sepotokele, who is a communication strategist, a media trainer as well, who's helping us to further disseminate some of the big stories of 2022 and discuss how the media played its role and, more importantly, how you as society felt about some of those topics. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning and Happy New Year.
A very good morning and a happy new year to you and the viewers.
So good to have you with us. We've got a lot to look through, and it's been a busy year. I want you to take a look at this. This is the story, certainly one of the stories that got South Africans talking about why we matter and why our royal leaders matter over international royal leaders. Let's take you back to that conversation. A Reuters article had information about what they call retained anger in British colonial times and recalled the brutal 1950s crushing of Kenya's Mau Mau rebellion as the sunset on Britain's empire, and a huge diamond that the British royal family acquired from South Africa in 1905, which the now late British Queen never returned despite calls for her to do so. Reuters is British. America's CNN reported on the same terrible legacy of the British royal family in Africa. But such criticism has been quite visible in Africa. Why? What is the narrative in Africa exactly over the passing of the Queen and especially over the rest of the continent? And really, how should we be reporting on the death of the Queen and British royalty overall?
It is possible to have empathy whilst also being critical. The two are not mutually exclusive. And I think I'd also like to end by saying that it's also important not to be selective about the manner in how grief is prescribed. I think it's very problematic for people to gaslight and to prescribe how people should feel, policing people's emotions, and when one looks at the way, for example, that the Western media covered the killing, frankly, of people like late Colonel Gaddafi in such humiliating photographs and footage, dehumanizing footage that was shown of his remains, as it were. Same can be said about, say, somebody like President Saddam Hussein, who was actually displayed almost undressed just before his passing. So who gets to be respected? Who gets to be honored?
Why is it that we continue to have these challenges that we continue to have? And why is it that Africans really are very much ambivalent to what has happened in the UK? It's not just because people want to be ambivalent, but they understand that she is a symbol of what colonialism, as it was, in the 1800s was, and she represents that. And now that she's dead, people should not be told how to ventilate their traumas, how to speak out when such kind of things happen. There's no right time, there's no wrong time. Any time is tea time, and I think we need to appreciate that. Unfortunately, the media in the West has given us this narrative that the way we are trying to showcase the negative aspects of your reign is unfortunate, and it's not the right time. And I think that is a problem, because we as Africans also have got a right to speak out when we feel that things have not really happened the way it should have happened even in our own continent here.
Most people, Professor Admire and Ausna Lady, if you even put a picture of Queen Mujaji, will they know her, even in this country? Let alone if you go to a street in London or Birmingham or Washington or New York or Paris or Sydney, Australia, will they know them? We in this country, will they even know her? Let's just start right there.
2022 was a big year for royal events, so certainly where the media is concerned. You had the passing of Queen Elizabeth, and then you had even the coming in of King Charles III. And then, at the same time, in that same year, here in South Africa, you had the coronation of the Zulu King. And a big discussion in 2022 was, does the media give equal attention to royalty that is our very own as it does to perhaps British royalty? Well, let's continue that discussion with Mr. Themba Sepotokele, who is, of course, a communication strategist and media trainer. How did the media fare with striking that balance in 2022?
Naledi, to be honest, there was no balance in this kind of a story, because let's admit firstly that the issue of colonialism plays a quite important role and a major role in society. Apartheid played a major role. So how, therefore, then do we begin to juxtapose the two, like you're trying to say Queen Mojaji? A lot of us don't even know her, what she does. Do we really blame their media? Partly yes, partly not, but there's contralesa, whose role exactly is to come in and ensure that they come and profile who these kings and queens of us are. Some of them we don't know. I'm Motswana, I have a Zulu name, but I don't really know them. So now when you look at the issue of colonialism, why Britain is so much known is because they made the point that, like, no, they even invite our presidents, all of them, from Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki, Jacob Zuma, and even now, Ramaphosa, they all visited UK to go and see the Queen. The Prince Ramaphosa last year went now to also visit Prince Charles, who is now their king. Yes, King Charles. So all I'm saying is that, and secondly, the issue of hierarchy of stories, to be honest, is something that we need to discuss. It's something that when we teach journalism, we say, look at the hierarchy of story. How do you give this prominence over this? Don't just go and cover it just because it is about Britain. Come back and say, how best can you also cover us?
But did we not redeem ourselves with the big stories that we saw coming out of KwaZulu-Natal, with the Zulu King, the coronation of the Zulu King? Did the media not give us a good attempt at saying, we're going to bring you this big cultural royal event?
It has to be conscious. It doesn't have to be by accident. It has to be planned properly and implemented. One of the things that now we've forgotten that the coronation happened and the certificate handing ceremony happened. But what is the plan going forward? How do we begin to profile all the other tribes? Who do we know in Bapedi, in Botswana culture, in other cultures? Like go to Northern Cape. We have their Khoisan. When do we begin to celebrate them and consciously, not when they go and protest outside their union building? So there has to be a conscious decision on the media's part to say that based on we are planning going forward this year, that this is how we're going to begin and profile and tell our story, but not wait for events, because when you're event-driven, when the event is over, then we all forget about it. So when you're conscious, the better.
I mean, in the clip that we played and you hear there, Melebohang Pheko, in that discussion that we had last year, you hear her essentially saying to myself, the guest and the viewers, that if we showed you a picture of Queen Mojaji, a lot of us wouldn't even know what she looks like, right? And there was a lot happening in 2022
Precisely.
With regards to Queen Mojaji. Did we give that enough coverage? I mean, that's a queenship that goes back so many years. It's such a rich part of our heritage. Did we give that enough attention?
It goes back to what I'm trying to say. There has to be a conscious decision to begin to profile such, not just happen by accident, because those are event-driven. If they're event-driven, therefore then it doesn't help. Question is, let's ask ourselves, what is it that we did for them the past Christmas? Did we profile them in the past Christmas? How are we going to profile them, the work they are doing in going forward? There has to be that kind of discussion between Contralesa, the media, where consciously as a society, we begin to have move with one voice and say that this is what we're going to do going forward.
All right, and that, I mean, it requires a lot of synergy between organizations like Contralesa, perhaps the media, and also looking at the diary of some of the royal families that are within our very own borders. And share your thoughts on how you think the media really fared on covering those royal stories of last year, of 2022. Use, of course, hashtag SABC Media Society. This also a big one for last year. SANEF made submissions to the Pietermaritzburg High Court where it stated that former President Jacob Zuma's prosecution of News 24 journalist Karen Moore was an abuse of process and the blatant intimidation of a guest. Take a look at this.
They were dealing with the flouting of the law, Section 41, subsection 6 of the NPA Act, which prohibits disclosure of any information to any person. Now, this is very important, choice of words. Disclosure of any information to any person. We are not here, from where we sit, from our perspective, dealing with a journalist. We are just dealing with any person that received information irregularly. This is the issue we're dealing with. That it happens to be Karen Moore, it's just incidental.
As a media practitioner, my job is to collect information. That's
Lawfully.
my job. At what point am I crossing a line?
We are crossing the line at a point when the information is not ready for public consumption for whatever reason.
I think that the only malice in this case is from Mr. Zuma. And it is very clear if you look at the merits of this case that it's an absolute nonsense case. Court papers is the issue at heart here. Now, we have a ruling in this country which was made by the Supreme Court of Appeal. It's the so-called Sanroll case that declared all court papers of public records.
Back to you, Mr. Mangina.
As you do, can you ask your producer to please flight the lawyer, because he's talking nonsense here. Can you just place the law so that you can talk facts? He's just talking and talking.
Well, okay, but let me ask you this.
No. Can we have this thing on here? Can you just please put it on the screen, because I've asked for it, so that you can talk facts, because the law says any document as well. So it makes light of the fact that it was this and it was not that. Yet the law is very clear. Any information, any document. So whether it was a one-pager or a half-a-pager is any document.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Mangi.
Please
Allow me please to ask you a question here and say, it certainly is one thing where you've got the former president and the foundation perhaps taking on downer about the legal elements of this case. That there is a legal issue. I'm concerned perhaps around whether or not the involvement of a media practitioner does something for media freedom in the country. What do you say to that? Let's focus particularly on them, because my show is about media.
Okay.
I'm not here to argue the merits of the case.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. I think the very first thing that you should do as the media is to go and try and go for an amendment of the law to make exclusion for yourselves, because right now the law does not recognize media. The law does not that particular section of the law does not recognize the issue that you're trying to bring. The law simply says you shall not do this.
That was a heated discussion, and a big one across the country as well. Will we continue to analyze how the media fared in 2022 with communication strategist and media trainer, Mr. Themba Sapotokele. You watched that interview.
Yep.
And I think firstly, let's actually deal with the big issue, that is, if you believe that the media, that the public's right to know supersedes a person's right to privacy, but particularly where that person is a politician.
All right, honestly speaking, it is not about whether the rights have been infringed or invaded. The rights, we all have rights, equal rights. True, nothing wrong. But the truth is, if you are a public figure, you have lesser rights. So you cannot come every now and then and start complaining about invasion of privacy while you are a public figure. We tell them, even in media ethics, that my rights as a private citizen and yours as a public citizen are equal. True, nothing wrong. But at some point, we have to go and question or expose things about you because you are a public figure. Where there is tax money involved, you are not going to sit there and say that just because you are public figure, you have rights, your rights should be protected. And if now what happened in court, the Constitutional Court have thrown this matter into disarray, unfortunately. So it shows that those who've been saying the former president is using the law or just to play games or to buy time, they seem to be right and seem to be correct. As much as his rights are protected, but look at what some of them are doing. Some of them who claim that their rights are protected, they are the ones who parade their lives blindly on social media, and tomorrow they cry foul.
There was, I mean, let's go back to the origins of that particular story. that essentially was the former president Jacob Zuma taking Karen Moore, the journalist, to court with a few other role players as well for sharing his medical records. I mean, I think the bigger discussion was, what does it mean when you do have politicians starting to take journalists to court? And you hear me in the clip there speaking to Mr. Manyi and Adrian Basson, essentially saying, as a journalist, my job is to collect information. At what point does it become illegal to collect information? And his answer was, there is no, there's no ambit in the law for journalists to be seen in that way, where they have the luxury of collecting information. There is something to be said about politicians that are able to take journalists to court. Is that a concern for media freedom?
It is both a concern, to be honest, and it depends how you look at it. Here, in this instance, it was meant to intimidate the media. It was meant to humiliate Karen Moore as a journalist. And to that thing on its own, the picture is still in my mind, was to send shivers down the spine to say, you dare not. I'm this kind of a person. So unfortunately, even how Mr. Manyi was trying to defend it, being emotional, here it doesn't matter whether it is the question of the law or not. But here is a question of, how did those medical records found themselves? They were not leaked like as he's claiming. So those are things that we shouldn't miss. Those are the things that were just given there on the docket. It was not given as a media leak.
Yeah, very, very interesting. We're talking highlights of 2022, and we're going to take a short break. We'll continue bringing you some of the big stories that media and society covered last year. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Media and Society, and we continue looking back at the big stories that we covered here on the show in 2022. Still joined by Mr. Themba Sepotokele, who is a communication strategist and media trainer, as we look back on the year that was. And of course, a big theme that we look at here on Media and Society is media freedom. As we observe a Black Friday, let's take you down the path of history, actually. On the 10th of October 1977, the World newspaper and its weekend publication was shut down by the apartheid government. The editor, Percy Qoboza, and others were arrested and kept behind bars for 5 to 6 months without trial. Well, the day is today called Black Wednesday, or National Press Freedom Day, and those are some of the views of the viewers and South Africans and whether or not they think South Africa has achieved media freedom.
I think when we talk about media freedom, we need to really, be able to contextualize what we actually mean. So there is media freedom as far as I, as a journalist, can publish, information as I see it, etc., using obviously all the tools of analysis that we have. So we can do that. Nobody stops us from doing that, even though they may try. So that is one part of media freedom. However, what we've seen increasingly, and not uniquely to South Africa, but also what throughout the world, what we've seen increasingly is the consequence of doing that. And I think when we analyze what media freedom is, we must never only look at the fact that, oh, well, you do have the platform and therefore you are able to do your job, but also look at what may be the consequence of doing that, particularly from those who claim to feel aggrieved, right? Where essentially in South Africa and suppose elsewhere in the world, it is really those who don't want to be held accountable for their actions.
Media freedom is an integral part of our democracy, and the architects of our democratic dispensation insisted that media freedom be a fundamental feature of our new society. And now we realize that today media play a very important role in entrenching our constitution and also playing an essential part in building a society.
Well, there certainly have been many examples that actually beg the question, is the media free to report on stories that they feel are of public interest? I mean, where do we sit in South Africa and as we reflect back on 2022 about what it's taught us about media freedom in the country? Are we in the right place?
Yeah, no. Let's admit that we are definitely in the right place. We fought for this freedom of the media. It is also enshrined in the Constitution. So it's something that we need to pride ourselves on, but we need to stand on the barricade. There's still threats and intimidation of journalists on social media. Cyberbullying is too much. What the clip that we played earlier on about Karen Moore, if you know the picture of her being in the dock, that tells you that we should stand on the barricade as a society, not only the media, because what we mistaken media freedom as a purview of journalists and editors. It is a societal issue that we must defend. We must stand on the barricade and defend media freedom, not go and celebrate International Press Day in May and Press Freedom Day or Black Wednesday in October. But these are the things that we should every day defend and talk about. If there is someone bullying a journalist, ill-treating a journalist, insulting journalists like Malema does normally on his press conferences, they should be called out. They cannot be journalists where they just go and laugh. A journalist gets insulted or be told to get off, and then we sitting there as colleagues, we just laugh. It cannot be. We have to sit and protect this freedom that those who came before us fought for. It was not all in vain. And media freedom, I'm passionate about it. It is something that it is not only for the purview of the media, it's for the entire society. We need to defend it because without it, we wouldn't even know what's going on.
What are the greatest threats right now in South Africa, though, to media freedom? I mean, is it the political leaders? Is it the media landscape in and of itself? Considering that we also operate in an environment that doesn't have a lot of resources. And so, you know, being able to exercise your work as a media practitioner may be particularly hard when you have newsrooms that are cutting their budgets and so forth.
Actually, there are a plethora of issues that are affecting media, journalists, reporting, and it starts exactly with institutions of higher learning, teaching journalism, academia, and I emphasize that we need to do an audit of the people who are teaching these young kids to come into the mainstream media, because when some of them come there, they don't even have the basics. Now you move in, you come into the media itself. Budgetary constraints, challenges facing the media. However, it doesn't mean that because there are challenges, we should disregard the basic tenets of journalism. With all the challenges are there, you can talk about journalism of the newsroom. That's an old phenomenon. It always forever be there. But also as journalists, take a mirror, flip it, look at yourself, and how are we doing things, and peer review ourselves.
Yeah. Well, here's an opportunity actually that we had in 2022 to really peer review ourselves. We saw things, for instance, escalating with the Senzo Mayiwa case, where journalists were removed from the court, and for a few hours, South Africa was unable to follow the Senzo Mayiwa murder trial that they have been glued to. And this was because journalists were said to have been, I suppose, running and trying to get the attention of the witness, Malala, before he took the stage. Let's take you back to that conversation. So a few days ago, journalists from the SABC, from Newsroom Africa and ENCA were barred from continuing with their coverage of the Senzo Mayiwa murder trial. Visuals show witness Tumelo Madlala being chased down court corridors for comment. This was even before he'd taken to the stand. Well, State Advocate George Baloyi told the court that journalists from the three broadcasters were intrusive and overbearing and left Madlala petrified.
My Lord, whilst we support the media coverage of the proceedings, the events of this morning, my Lord, are simply unacceptable. Yesterday, I informed the court that the witness that we arranged as a substitute witness has asked that his evidence be rescheduled. And, my Lord, it's precisely this type of conduct by members of the media that will, or that might imperil the state case.
The kind of behavior you are describing would have been deliberately staged.
They are disturbing the proceedings of the court. They are known, my Lord, it's not everyone. It's ENCA, SABC, and Africa News.
I must admit we might have overextended our hand in the manner in which we really tried to bring information to our viewers. And as Tumelo Matlala had been coming into court, we had followed him inside court and perhaps tried to get a sense from him what it meant for him to be inside this court so many years after his best friend had been shot and killed.
We cannot be interviewing a witness before the witness has taken a witness stand and spoken to the judge and what you call and gave evidence. It is incorrect. So I think they dropped the ball there, and it was really something that could jeopardize the agreements that SANEF has made with the high courts and the magistrate courts. Many magistrates are still refusing journalists to come in. We are still fighting a case over the Zandile, Gumede, and others in Durban, where the magistrate refused that the recording should be done.
There's a magistrate commission guideline on how the media should behave in courts, and that is to respect the decorum and the dignity of the court proceedings.
And the fury on social media on that one was massive. It really, really was, because South Africans really wanted to see all the details of the Senzo Meyiwa trial. Of course, the media was allowed back inside, and we have continued to keep you updated on the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. But what was the lesson there, you think, for media practitioners particularly?
The issue of media ethics is non-negotiable. We have to all the time adhere by the basic tenets of journalism. Such stories where the media end up hawking the headlines and coming back and apologizing, that, to be honest, was the three journalists from the three TV stations. They are seasoned journalists. They are not just journalists that started yesterday. They know the law. But what still we believe in the Press Council is that we should keep on refreshing and reminding journalists, because these are examples, bad as it is, because it opens criticism, a floodgates of criticism to the media. This is the lesson that should never be repeated again. Never, ever such be repeated. You stick to the basic tenets of journalism. This is not a scoop. There is no way that you are not going to see the face of the person going to testify or hear his voice. So, and things that we apologize, but sometimes an apology, from my point of view, that is not only good enough. There has to be consequences for reckless transgressors, especially those who continue to do such. If they repeat again, I believe where I'm seated, there has to be their own different companies, SANEF, and they should take a kind of a stance. Because when you open a gate of criticism, unfortunately, we have nothing to defend. We have nothing to defend about media freedom. We'll go back and say that, no, these guys do as they please. And my biggest fear, and I say it every now and then, I don't want the media to go back to 2010, where there was a proposed media appeals tribunal. That sent shivers down the spine. It was not a good thing. Glad the media came out, united, and fought about it. But we cannot relax. We must stand forever on the barricade. Ensure that journalists, those who are coming, those who are experienced, those who are new, understand that every now and then they must adhere by the basic tenets of journalism.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. A happy new year to you, Mr. Matsipotokele. And we look forward to seeing, hopefully, the book coming out this year.
Amanda is coming.
Amanda's coming. All right, great stuff. That there, Mr. Themba Sipotokele. He is a communication strategist as well as a media trainer. We're going to take a short break. When we return, though, we continue looking at some of the highlights of 2022, the year that was. Welcome back to Media and Society. We'll continue casting an eye back into what was 2022. And for this part, we're joined by Caitlin Rawson, who is a social commentator who has quite a following on TikTok and other social media platforms. Caitlin, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really good to have you with us. So we did a lot of stories as well looking at social media. In 2022, right here on Media and Society. And a big discussion was cancel culture.
Cancel culture gives the power to ordinary people to call to account people, celebrities and people with power. and that's not a bad thing. And cancel culture are saying we call for the isolation, a boycott of this person because they've behaved badly, or they've expressed racist views or sexist views. That's not a bad thing, and people are entitled to boycott those that they think cross a path of social acceptability. That's in fact a good thing. It helps the social and political discourse. There is a danger that occasionally it becomes a mob and it runs wild on Twitter, and it becomes threatening and harassing. It is sometimes abused, so we've seen some very petty cases. But in fact, in most cases, when you take a close look at those, they're being used for political effect.
But the truth is, society also responds to certain things that are contextual. If you think in South Africa of the situation of women, GBV, which is very rife, like Maboe story, or even DJ Fresh story, the minute you say or you do something that seems to be reinforcing or repeating this very toxic culture of hitting women, insulting women, treating women as many people do, society is, even brands are forced to create a distance between themselves and you, because they don't want to be accused of supporting people who perpetuate GBV, as it were. But then the third thing, especially in the case of Maboe, is that when 2-3 years later the courts say, but wait a minute, this is not what it was, then it becomes something else, then it changes the narrative, that we have to have a fresh conversation. But the story still remains that you can't keep an association with somebody who is seen to be perpetuating something that is antisocial.
Yeah, cancel culture in 2022, a big theme through the year. Caitlin, some of the big cancel culture moments for you last year?
I think last year there was a lot of talk about cancel culture, and more so than any particular moments, it was a lot of the just term being thrown around for me. I see it a lot on my platform that you often get accused of participating in cancel culture or engaging in cancel culture, and there definitely is an argument of when people do take it too far and are really getting into abusive behavior, especially online, where there's anonymity that can protect you and make you feel emboldened to say things that you wouldn't in person. But a lot of the times it's genuinely people that are trying to engage in good faith and call awareness to and accountability to these public figures who really have stepped out of line in some way or have said something that people may find offensive. And I think a big one that often is a kind of person who gets brought up a lot is Helen Ziller and the things that she says, especially on social media and Twitter. And I don't think there's anything wrong with people saying, look, you've said this on a public platform and we take issue with it, and we don't appreciate the fact that you are conducting yourself in this way on social media. And oftentimes that then gets taken into, well, no, you're trying to cancel Helen and you're trying to cancel her and you're trying to engage in this cancel culture, when it's not necessarily always that. It's sometimes just saying, look, she said something and I don't agree with that. I don't want to endorse that or see people promoting it in a positive way.
I mean, it's an interesting one, because I think when you're on the receiving end of cancel culture, and I've heard these discussions happen quite a lot, where someone is accused, for instance, of gender-based violence and that the accusation is made on social media. A lot of people have said, well, you're ruining the person's reputation without actually having taken them to a court of law. That's a really big discussion, that one, right? But there's something about, and I suppose what I'm taking from what you're saying is that cancel culture has really put the power back into citizens as well.
I think so as well. And with gender-based violence, I think that's a really big one and an important one to kind of discuss how we engage in these topics, especially on social media, because we know that in South Africa we live in a country where gender-based violence is so rife, and there's often not a lot of recourse for victims of gender-based violence. And often you hear about stories of people going to the police and trying to report the assault or the victimization that they've faced, and it's horror stories of what happens when they do try and go through the official and proper channels to report what's happened to them. So then they feel like the option is to come to social media and at least say, this is my experience, let me at least warn other people or try and expose this person who's committed these acts against me. And the problem is, us as kind of viewers, we then need to be able to evaluate that and come to our conclusions. And of course we always want to support victims when they're coming forward, because it is so difficult difficult to come forward. And I'm always of the perspective that, you know, I don't think people are very likely to lie about these sorts of things. So we must always look at these things and really take them seriously. And when there are allegations, take them seriously, but also not get blinded by a mob of just hate and then going and spreading abuse and such on social media.
That's the point, right? What is the difference between cancel culture and that mob of hate?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one of like where to draw the line of like, are you actually trying to bring awareness to a particular issue? Are you trying to expose a person for what they've done and what they've said? Or are you just wanting to spread hate and spread vitriol and abuse someone on social media? Because there is, I think, a big difference in that.
Yeah, 100%. That was a big one. It certainly was. I mean, you look at the story of, say, for instance, Katlego Maboe, the television presenter who essentially lost a lot of his deals, came back after being redeemed by the courts. But a lot of that stemming from social media saying, look at what he's done to his own personal life.
And I think it's also like the more so now with the age of social media, you can see a lot more consequences for the things that you say. And there's a lot of public figures who are now seeing that they can't just say anything they want, even like with DJ Fresh and what he said and the consequences that he had to face for that. And it's now an idea of we have to get used to a new landscape in which you can't just say whatever you want on social media, on whatever platform you have, and then expect to not face any consequences for that. And if you really want to, like if like DJ Fresh, if he really stood by that and believed that that was his right to say that, then you need to be able to stand up to the consequences of that and make sure that whatever you do say, you're willing to stand behind it, because you can't just avoid any accountability and consequences 100%. For what you choose to say.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a very big one. Let's look at another one here where we've seen artists like Tall Ass Mo who've come out swimming at South Africa's cancel culture, especially given the fact that that he was accused of a law as well. But really, in a country where gender-based violence is and racism is such a big issue, you know, what are your thoughts about where we draw the line where cancel culture is concerned? But let's look at this one as well. A big theme that we covered in 2022 is the one of influencers, right? Your take on the rise of influencers. This is the discussion we had in 2022. Now, this led to the advertising space shifting huge chunks of their spend from what is known as traditional media to what we now know as social media influencers. But various research papers, in fact, say a few incidents are leading to the public trusting social media influencers less and less. Take a look at this.
Close to 2 million. That's the number of people who follow Mihlali Ndamase on Instagram. That's bigger than almost all newspapers. It's bigger than many TV shows' audience numbers, and many radio stations outside the SABC can only dream of those numbers. This speaks to where audiences are moving.
With influencer culture, we've moved into a world that's digital first. We all know this. Our phones are a second screen to us. In fact, I think we've moved from a second screen to a first screen, being our phone. TV is what we're watching secondary, and our phones are in our hands first.
While the influencer industry seemed to be growing at a fast pace, especially because of the rise of TikTok at the height of the pandemic, there's worry that online spaces have also found success for fraudsters like the Tinder swindler, which could also chase some people away.
One thing to actually note is, and I think this is the challenge where we find ourselves, the influencer space hasn't for the longest time been regulated. And I think regulated in terms of from those who say, I am an influencer, to your point, 5,000, I'm now an influencer, to the brand manager who's going to put 50K for a 5,000 Rand followed individual. So the space is largely very unregulated, and I think everyone makes their rules as they go along, which is a bit of a challenge, and I think that's what causes a lot of these in-betweeners, and you are finding a lot of fraudsters. So in South Africa, really, I think it depends on the type of brand that you are and the space that you are trying to talk to.
And to put it into perspective, you know, a couple of years ago when I started in the space, we needed to go and beg clients, give us a chance, let us show you what we can do, let us show you what influencers can do for you. And now we're in a position where, you know, brands are coming to us. We're on what we call media buying schedules. We don't need to hustle them for, please, you know, give us 50,000 Rand, let's try and do something for you. We're actually on these schedules.
Well, we continue the conversation with social media commentator Caitlin Rawson. 2022, a big year for influencers. And by that, I mean this. I get the sense that prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the influencer space looked a lot different to what it did in 2022, right?
Definitely. I mean, even just from my personal experience with my own platform, I really started getting into commenting on social media and becoming involved in this sort of space in the COVID pandemic. It was a time where a lot of people started experimenting with the space. We've seen the huge increase in apps like TikTok, and even on other platforms like Instagram and Twitter, with everyone being kind of isolated and at home, they turned to social media as their source of information and where they were going to find connection with people as well. So it's become a hugely important space for everyone, I think.
Yeah, but and I mean that in the sense that it also became quite accessible, because pre-2020 it was the big stars that were the influencers. There's a sense now that anyone can do it if they really put in the work.
Yeah, I think especially in South Africa, you would see before 2020 overseas, there were definitely big influencers in America and in the UK and other European countries. But in South Africa, I definitely think there's been a huge shift since 2020. And we're now seeing really big influencers starting to emerge on different platforms like Instagram and TikTok and even Twitter and those sorts of platforms. And it's been, the pandemic has actually been a really good opportunity for growth for a lot of these influencers now.
Yeah, because what I think and you may have noted this as well in 2022, is that in the past we would have had the superstar who was already famous go onto social media and grab the numbers. But now what you've got is the social media star with the numbers actually making it into mainstream media, which has been a very interesting trip. What do you think the 2023 is going to look like then for the influencer?
I think 2023 will just see more growth of the influencers. I think that it's not really slowing down at all. If anything, the growth that a lot of influencers seeing is increasing. And like you said, we're seeing a lot more of that influencers breaking now into mainstream media and engaging in on a different sort of level, because although with influencers, they've now become kind of celebrities in their own right, there is still this very strong allure of being recognized by TV and by radio and making it on those sorts of platforms. Because with social media, it's almost like anyone can pick up their phone and pick up their camera and start posting videos on TikTok or start making Instagram posts. Whereas there's still that kind of barrier to entry with mainstream media, and to get recognized by the mainstream media is still a big thing for a lot of influencers.
Is the pie big enough? And I want to sit with this one a little bit, because I think if you speak to a lot of young people, they're working towards becoming an influencer on their social media pages. Is the pie big enough for all of them?
I think in terms of financially, there's still a large limitation in South Africa as well, although brands are now starting to see the importance of influencers and use influencers in their marketing a lot more, there aren't an abundance of opportunities in terms of everyone's going to be able to get those monetization and those deals. So I think in terms of if you're wanting to become an influencer just to share your thoughts, share your opinions, and connect with people, then yes, there's definitely space for whoever wants to join that. But if you're really trying to seriously make it a career and get some sort of monetization out of it, that's where the pie starts to shrink a little bit and get a little bit smaller.
Right. Well, we're going to take a short break. We'll continue our conversation with Caitlin as we look at the highlights of 2022 for media and society. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Media and Society, and we continue our conversation with Caitlin Rawson as we look back at some of the major stories that made waves in 2022, particularly those that we brought you here on Media and Society. And of course, our conversation, Caitlin, has been largely around social media. But here's the beauty of social media, is that social media also has given a platform to citizen journalists, right? Where you've got a wave of people that are telling stories about what's happening in their own community, using their own social media platforms to share those stories. Come back. Well, it's the video that appeared on social media with a 110-year-old grandmother being evicted from her home. And that led to traditional media taking on the story and shouting about the injustice of it all. Well, because of the noise from one citizen journalist, The government has stepped in to assist, and the grandmother now has her home back.
The story is something that has been going on for some time, and at one stage I even had a one-on-one with the guy about what's happening, what's going on. It's just the thing, it's a family issue. So, and now I wanted to find out what's going on, what's happening. I had a one-on-one with him, and then he was like, no, my cousin sold it to me. You can't even come and interfere. It's a family issue. Then I remember at one stage, I even suggested to him that, okay, how about as a community we raise funds to refund you? And then he was like, no, you can't do that. I want my house.
So if it wasn't for, citizen journalism, which was practiced here, we wouldn't have known. And if it wasn't through the sharing that happened on social media, and also just the community media at Jersey FM to take it forward.
I mean, that was a big story. It broke the hearts of so many, right? But there was something so beautiful about a community member capturing what was happening on her phone and sharing it until mainstream media caught it. What did you think when you saw that?
I think it's like a real testament to the power of social media and the fact that someone can, see an issue in their community and decide that they're not going to stand for it. They don't think it's acceptable what's happening. Like you said, film it on their phone and then just share it, and for it to then eventually be picked up by mainstream media and for the government to actually even get involved and address the issue. I think it's a really strong kind of showing of the power of social media and what people can achieve when they have especially their hearts and their minds in the right place of using the power of social media for good.
I mean, we've seen a lot of it in the past. It's not necessarily something new. Various big media organizations have created platforms for citizen journalism. I remember, I think CNN having something like iReport and asking for people to submit that. Is there a way for mainstream media to start doing the same thing? Will we create a platform perhaps for citizen journalism?
I definitely think so, that there's room for that, of just hearing the voices and the stories of your regular citizens in the country and getting in touch with the people who are having these lived experiences of whatever they're going through wherever it is in the country, and getting that more, especially diversity of the range of experiences that people have here in South Africa. And I think that through using social media, we are so much more interconnected as a world now, where we can have conversations with people from various different places and different points in society. So I think it's a really useful tool that we can use to be able to reach out and engage with even more people than we may have been able to in the past.
Yeah, it certainly helps that if we're able to actually educate people about just the power they have on their phones, right? So that even young people don't think that their phones are just there to do a TikTok and have some fun, which is absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that either. But to use those platforms to tell real stories.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful. And even just recently at the beginning of December, we had the incident with the Hank's Old Irish pub.
Yes.
And how that was, they filmed the altercation on their cell phones and then published that and put that out on social media, and it got picked up by the media. And now everyone knows about what happened there and the incident that took place. So I think that's another example of just a really powerful way that you can use social media, and just the fact that you're able to so easily film things on your phone, take record of things and get it out there so that more people can be aware and more people can know what's going on in our country at all these different places that we probably, if this was 10, 20 years ago, we probably never would have heard of what happened at that pub.
Yeah, active citizenry that is right there in the palm of your hand. I really, really like that one. And then there's the issue that we've had, that we've discussed in 2022 around whether or not you, as the public, actually have trust in the media.
Most media personalities or media houses do verify their stories before they share with the nation.
Citizens can get the latest information through media, and it helps people to build a relationship and staying connected.
I don't really believe in the broadcasting media because they have a tendency of just spreading misinformation, sometimes being biased.
Too often, major media outlets will carry the story without validity, especially on corruption, political issues, even crime.
Media is very much pertinent and important in our day-to-day operation. You see, number one, it gives us the information that's accurate and functional. Number two, we learn about what's happening around the globe.
I don't really trust all the information that I receive from media because I feel like most of the information that we receive, especially information that involves the government, I feel like it's very suspicious because the information contradicts each other.
I do trust the media because it provides us with information that is accurate, and because of media we get to receive information about all the things that are happening all over the world.
Trust in the media. It's a big conversation even on social media about whether or not people trust media houses. I mean, what have you picked up about that particular conversation?
I think there is kind of a growing distrust for mainstream, what people call mainstream media, amongst like the social media like commentators that you see, even in my comment section, I see oftentimes people saying that they don't trust what they see on the news and that they'd rather come to social media for their news. And I think there's obviously it's healthy to have a certain level of skepticism with anything that you hear, and you can't just blindly trust what you're being told, but also that needs to carry to social media as well, because there's people with all sorts of agendas on social media as well who are spreading whatever information that they want to, and if anything, it's less rigorously checked than what gets presented on the news, on the radio, on TV. So I think while it is healthy to have that skepticism, I know even with the IOL story about the 10 babies that were born, that obviously doesn't help breed trust in the media at all.
We still don't know where the babies are.
Exactly. So people must have that skepticism and think okay, is what am I hearing true? But you also can't get to the realm of complete conspiracy theory where you're disbelieving everything that you hear just because it's coming from a particular source.
Yeah.
Even if you might distrust a source, sometimes the information that they might be giving you is correct, and you need to use your own kind of judgment to evaluate the information that you've been given and come to your own conclusions based on that information.
Yeah. Well, I think just as we wrap up and we begin the new year that is 2023, you are, as a social commentator, you've looked at the landscape of social media and even mainstream media. I mean, what is it that you feel we need to get right for 2023? The lessons learned in 2022.
I think for 2023, what we can take from 2022 is there needs to be a building of trust amongst those on social media, citizens in the country, and the mainstream media as well. And we can all kind of work together to produce really positive results, like we saw with the story we just talked about with the grandmother who was evicted from her house. That can produce really positive results. That's citizens, social media, and the mainstream media all coming to work together. And we need more of that and less of people trying to kind of just push forward their own agendas and just trying to, become famous quickly on social media by spreading false information. That's a really big problem with fake news and those sorts of things, of people just wanting to get their 10 minutes of fame quickly by posting information that isn't necessarily beneficial and isn't going to help us as a society moving forward. So we need to focus more on the positive aspects of what media can do for us and what social media can do for us going forward, rather than getting caught up in the negatives.
Yeah. And of course, we've got a platform like this one where you can hold us accountable as well as right here as the media. Caitlin Rawson, social media commentator, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Happy New Year, sis.
Yes, Happy New Year.
All right, and Happy New Year to you as well. We hope that you will enjoy the very first day of 2023. And thank you for joining us for our first installment of Media and Society for the year. Stay with us throughout 2023, and we promise to get bigger and better at finding the intersection of where media and society meet. Have yourselves a wonderful day.